Welcome to the Cannabis Investor Series. Join the Canadian Securities Exchange and our partners as we present a first-hand look into the rapidly evolving cannabis industry and the opportunities that lie ahead. Featuring the experts and influencers who are gaining insight into the challenges shaping the next phase of this industry's growth. Learn about what's next in American cannabis, how cannabis culture and capital markets are converging, the life-changing innovations in health and wellness which are shaping our economic realities and world ahead. Finally, the impact of a growing global acceptance of cannabis. Where education meets opportunity, subscribe now to the Cannabis Investor Series. Hi, welcome to the Cannabis Investor Series. I'm one of your co-hosts, Barrington Miller from the Canadian Securities Exchange, and today I'm joined with my colleague, Serin. And at the Canadian Securities Exchange, we will embark on a 4-week odyssey in the exploration and celebration of all things cannabis. We will start off this week with investing in American cannabis, followed by cannabis culture and capital markets in week 2. After that, cannabis health and wellness, and rounding out the series, we will travel the globe with the global cannabis economy. Events like this couldn't be possible without special partners. This week's partner is Benzinga Cannabis. They cover all things cannabis, hemp, CBD, and psychedelics with a focus on finance and business. And if you like this content, please make sure to visit CSE_TV on YouTube, click, watch, and subscribe. These sessions will be available in the future in a longer format, so please stay tuned. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Serin.
Thank you, Barrington. I'm so excited for today. I can't wait for all the content that's going to come. We have a big day ahead of us, so make sure that you stay tuned for all of it. This will be posted to our YouTube page once it's all said and done, but hopefully you can join us for the whole day. We're going to start off with the federal landscape en route to legalization. We're going to move into going beyond the headlines, the United States of cannabis, hear from corporate leaders and some of the key states in the cannabis sector in the U.S., starting on the West Coast. We'll head our way east from there. And then we're going to end off with a panel on banking and cannabis and the ins and outs of that. So stay tuned for the whole event. Our first, I need to introduce our first panel. Our first panel is a fireside chat. It is with our one and only CEO, Richard Carleton, and he is chatting with Michael Bronstein. Michael Bronstein is co-founder and president of the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp.
I'm Richard Carleton, the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Securities Exchange, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the Cannabis Investor Series. We're going to have a month-long series for investors interested in learning more about the cannabis space in Canada, the United States, and beyond. I'm really pleased this afternoon to be joined by my good friend, Michael Bronstein. Michael has been at the forefront of the cannabis wars in the United States at the local, state, and federal level, working to build a significantly more sensible framework than perhaps what we had before and what we have today. Michael, could you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp?
Absolutely. And Richard, thank you so much for having me today. And thank you again for everything that you have done, that the exchange has done, to be able to help move the industry forward and be able to help bring capital, much needed capital, into this industry. I often say, and when we've talked about it before, there was a before and after in the cannabis industry of the decision of when the Canadian Securities Exchange decided to get into the market. And in our view, it was just such a tremendous step forward. And so I want to thank you also for your leadership, your friendship, obviously, and all the work that you do at the exchange to make it easier for entrepreneurs and businesses to be able to function in a marketplace. It's really been tremendous, and the relationship has been tremendous. So from the ATACH side, I'm president of the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp. We're one of the oldest trade associations now in what is a very young industry. We got started now. About 7 years ago, give or take, we had the idea to formulate the industry association. And at the time, I was approached by a number of industry leaders. Mostly were in Colorado, because Colorado was a state that was leading. It was on the leading edge. It's still in many ways in the vanguard of the cannabis industry. When we talk about Colorado, there are many fond memories about that time. And there were leaders in Colorado who approached me, and they said, look, we're going to be moving national, and we need to be able to have advocacy and have a professionalized industry and a professionalized place to advocate for sensible cannabis and hemp policy. And that conversation developed into the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp. And we are today now in so many different states. We have state level organizations that we have memorandums of understanding with. We have international organizations that we have MOUs with. We developed a memorandum of understanding with ASTM International, which is one of the largest standards bodies in the world. We have an MOU with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and have really been working this issue at a very high level for a very long time. And that's the difference that we've brought to this game. And I think that we were a little ahead of the market. If you remember back several years ago, the market probably wasn't necessarily ready to engage in the types of conversations that we're engaging in right now, or even that what we've engaged in over time. And the level of sophistication of operations, the level of the business has grown astronomically, even over the last couple of years. And every 12 months, this industry seems to change. So we're excited to be at the forefront of it. We're excited to be a recognized leader in what it is that we're doing. And we also are excited to be advocates for capital markets. And this is an initiative. This is a very important thing to ATACH. It's a very important thing to our members. And we believe that it is the next frontier, really, of this industry. And thank you for leading it. And in our view, it's going to be the next pillar to fall.
Well, thank you for your kind words, Michael. Most of the viewers, I believe, will be from Canada, but we'll also have folks from all over the world watching this over the next several weeks. Canadians, of course, will be familiar with the liberalization of cannabis rules in Canada, really coming from a top-down approach, where courts originally imposed a requirement on the government to come up with better regulation of medical marijuana cultivation and provision to patients, which then quickly morphed into adult recreational use, promoted by our current Prime Minister while he was running for election for the first time. And that was the real driver behind the Canadian process. In the United States, it was exactly the opposite of that. It was really a ground up movement from a number of individuals in different state levels that has ultimately gotten into the legislative conversation in Washington. Perhaps you could give us just a quick rundown in terms of how that worked, what the process looks like from a high level, and how people should be thinking about these issues as they read the news every week.
Yes, and I think that you're right to point out that in the United States, from a regulatory standpoint, there was a bottom-up approach as opposed to a top-down approach. And in Canada, and one of the things often in the conversations that I have with people who are operating in Canada and some of the larger businesses, is that there were some things that made a lot of sense doing from the top down, and there are other things that make sense doing it from the bottom up. It's just a different system, right? In the same way that U.S. democracy is different than parliamentary democracy or something like that, right? They both achieve an end, but they achieve it differently. And that's what's going on in the, for the international viewers, that's what's going on in the United States space. The United States state level law has a lot of the time been considered a laboratory of democracy. And there haven't been as much of a challenge to federalism, nor as much of an experimentation in the federal principle as with cannabis legalization, which under federal law is very much, it's not a black or white issue. It's the Controlled Substance Act makes it federally illicit at the federal level, and states have developed their own laws, and many of these laws were started when the cannabis industry started. The reason why it proliferated the way it did, and the why we see the structure that we see right now, the way it's evolving, is many of these states developed through voter initiatives. So the voter initiative process, marijuana legalization is popular, and there was a thesis that that it would only get more popular. And over time, what has happened is a number of states have legalized through ballot initiative. You've got Colorado is a good example of this. California, Washington, like the big states that were happening through ballot initiatives at the time. And so fundamentally, it was voters that were saying, "Well, we want it," and maybe the legislators weren't there, and voters were saying, "Well, we want it." So these systems were coming into place on a state-by-state basis. Eventually, there were some protections that were built up to help protect the state-level markets. And now there's been a large proliferation of state-level markets. I remember from an advocacy perspective, we thought it was going to be a big deal when the first legislature would legalize adult use cannabis because it hadn't happened before, right? And now we have several legislatures that have gone about and done that, and now we're in a race really between a number of different states to do it, and we stand depending on how you count. I mean, over these last couple of weeks, we've added 3 significant markets with the ability to add several more as we move forward. So we remain really bullish on this industry. Now, how does that relate to what's going on at the federal level? Federal politics have, and from a marketplace perspective, have always been complicated with cannabis. Just there's no other way to describe it. It's complicated, and the movement of the states will at some point push the federal government into a position as to how they will act. The fact that they need to act, which is occur every day that we pass, the need to act is even more. We see legislation coming down the pike. We see several senators are getting together right now to talk about legislation. Senator Schumer, Senator Booker, Senator Wyden are anticipated to drop a bill in the not too distant future for what federal legalization is going to look like. We saw the Safe Banking Act pass the House again and is now over in the Senate. So in my view, I think anybody who's outside of this that's looking at it firmly believes that the United States will legalize marijuana in some way at the federal level. But the big question is when.
Absolutely. And of course, what investors need to understand when they're comparing the opportunities and challenges for operating businesses in Canada, the United States, overseas, and so on, is there are some pretty significant challenges for U.S. operators as a result of the continued federal illegality, which is why, of course, people are so excited about the prospect for those days coming to an end. Perhaps you could just give us a quick rundown of some of the issues that face the operators in the United States as a result of cannabis being a Schedule I substance.
There are many issues that operators face in the United States, and where some of the challenges have also created opportunity in the industry too, in terms of first mover advantage. So when you see companies that have taken an associated risk, and I remember several years ago where there really was a lot of question marks around where the federal government was on this, interaction with the Cole memorandum and risks that people were taking in order to come into this market. So those that have taken a risk, what we're finding is the market has really flourished, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart. Okay. And you have to go through this business, like other businesses, has its own, has its own challenges and its own risk profile. And what I would say as somebody who's championed the market and continues to see really exciting opportunities in the market and the future for investment in this, when you look at what companies have in terms of risk, there's certain risks that are acceptable risk, and there's certain risks that either need legislative change or there needs to be more forward thinking about where the federal government is. So, we see banking talked about all the time. Banking, there are banks that are banking the industry, but access to capital, traditional banking, those types of relationships are harder to come by in the industry. Not insurmountable, harder to come by, and definitely something that in order to make cannabis businesses more like other businesses, to be able to extend those protections.
And I was going to say, even to the extent of inability in many jurisdictions to obtain mortgage financing and insurance that traditional business operators really take for granted.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just, the problem actually goes further down the line. The employees who are there that right. may run into issues in terms of accessing, more to traditional financing and financial services. And there's been much more of a discussion and dialogue around that. But if you were really to ask, these things are being worked out in the industry. And by the way, there is large bipartisan support to fix banking, and the American public is educated on the issue that marijuana businesses can't bank. In fact, if you were to ask somebody on it, I think that's basically a large issue. A lesser known issue that should be known to investors, and it is also very well known to businesses, is what's called 280E, which is in the federal tax code. Essentially, a 280E provision does not allow you to deduct normal expenses as a normal business would, because it's being applied to cannabis businesses that are considered by the IRS not to be in compliance with federal law and the Controlled Substance Act. And so that elevates the level of taxation to businesses, and it makes it much harder to operate in terms of profitability. Right. And if these things are removed, which we anticipate that they will be removed, overnight, the cannabis market and these businesses, which are doing well, automatically will be able to add much different investment into their business, bottom line, funding, like all of the types of things that you would see that would be more traditional, that would allow real scalability. And we're already seeing scale in the industry. Okay. So that's already happening with this in place, but without that in place, that is one of the biggest business impediments that we're concerned about and we continue to advocate on.
Right. And I think that's, to me, one of the most impressive things that you're mentioning here, that we have a number of companies that are successfully operating, even, I guess, in spite of these challenges. And with the states that have come online and will be coming online over the next 12 months, even without changes at the federal level, it appears that there are a lot of new business opportunities for the successful companies that have developed so far.
That's right. And there have been successful strategies. So the market has gone in phases over how businesses have approached strategy. So we talk about multi-state operators right now, many of whom trade on the exchange. And the strategy really is to build from market to market to market. And it kind of went in different cycles. So we saw basically a land grab in between states, where you would try to get licensed in as many states as possible to build up the footprint. We saw some alternative strategies, which were to build out very deep, with a deep imprint into states to show that. And so there are kind of a number of different strategies that people have approaching the market. Now I feel like we're entering a phase in the market from a business opportunity, but also from a market-based opportunity of the things that we're seeing is we're starting to see brands matter more. Yep. So this was a discussion. This was a discussion long ago in the industry. When would brands start to matter even more? Those things are coming. I'm super excited about the cannabis beverage category, which a lot of people have taken a look at. But as an advocate, ATACH put together a cannabis beverage council, of which we have luminaries across the board from both the cannabis industry and the alcohol industry coming together really to try to figure out the regulatory perspective of how beverage is going to go forward. And there are a number of people that are looking at it. So you're seeing products, you're seeing processes, you're seeing IP being developed around it, and we're starting to see those types of opportunities in the marketplace.
All the signs of a maturing consumer packaged goods industry.
That's right.
Okay, so we should take just a moment to talk about hemp, of course, which has also had its trials and tribulations from a regulatory perspective, because there was great excitement 2-3 years ago about the prospects of hemp. Obviously, not just for CBD extraction, but also as a source of oils, fiber, protein substitutes, and so on. And with the passage of the Farm Bill, Congress certainly gave the regulators at the federal level a clear message that hemp was to be appropriately regulated. I gather American farmers then proceeded to plant several 100,000 acres at least of the crop. And unfortunately, I think as we sit today, we're still waiting for the rules from the different regulators at the federal level. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I mean, hemp and the hemp market, the rollout of the hemp market is something that we watched very closely. And one of the concerns that we had as advocates was the conflict between the earlier iterations of the hemp market in states and then federally what some of the rules that were going to be adopted. We knew that it was going to be tough to convert from where the market was to where the market was going, especially on the federal level. And the hemp industry has really been through some tough times over the last couple of years. I would say growing pains right. over a number of these issues. But hemp is not a uniform market. Right? Like we talk about hemp, there are a number of things, there are a number of products, there are a number of ideas in the hemp industry. It's not just, CBD supplement side of the market. There's material application. There's been some fiber optic testing around applications. There's been a whole world of kind of research that's now going on around hemp and industrializing that process. So that the hemp market, in our view, the hemp industry, what we have to do is be able to advocate so that the market right now, that there's certainty in the market and that the federal government's rules are much better for a developing industry. And in my view, there is definitely a will to do that. There is a will to be able to create a new market. There's a will for farmers. And this is an issue that goes across the partisan divide. Everyone wants to see hemp succeed.
Especially Mitch McConnell, I gather, with Kentucky as the largest potential cultivator of hemp, I believe.
Yes, he has a hemp pen. He has been a champion of the market, and he helps spearhead federal legalization of hemp.
Okay, so we're starting to get to the end of our chat, Michael. Unfortunately, we could go on all afternoon, I'm guessing, but so it's I guess it's time to get into our crystal ball and have a look at what we see over the next 6 months and beyond in this space. You mentioned before, the SAFE bill has cleared the House again. Is that the second time or the third time? I can't remember. I've lost track. But it's also clear that, as you say, there is bipartisan support in the Senate, which is now barely controlled by the Democrats, for measures which, to some degree, to either address the banking and commercial concerns or full-on descheduling with possible expungement, as well as addressing ideas around social equity associated with the descheduling of cannabis. So perhaps you could give your view in terms of where we're at and where we're likely to be, to give people a context, as I say, as they read the newspapers over the next few months, as things undoubtedly develop.
Yeah, to me, this is and I always get asked this question, and I think it's a great one. And to me, I always think, when will then be now? Soon, right? So what I would say, and the things that we're watching, is there's a mass proliferation, both from a legislative perspective at the state level. We do believe that going forward, the federal level will have to move. Mm-hmm. And if we're looking at, we're going to see really a very large push around the next set of legislation that's being put forward. We've already seen Senator Chuck Schumer, who has been a champion of the industry, has been a champion of social equity, has been a champion of so many things as it relates to cannabis and hemp, that he has said that he wants to see comprehensive reform, right. That he believes that everything should take place at once. And this is a very positive sign, because if we can get rid of every issue that we have and be able to commercialize the marketplace and a number of the other issues that are going on around cannabis, we will have fixed a majority of the problems that we see going forward. And to me, it's been a really long time to get to a point where we really are on the precipice of federal legalization, movement at the federal level in the United States. Does it happen, 6 months, 12 months? Where is it? I mean, we could see that there are incremental changes that happen in between on banking, that happen on other reforms. But right now, what I would say to you is that the federal government knows that this is an issue. It's one that's being championed on Capitol Hill by a number of legislators, and it really is getting closer to the day, not further away from the day, where we're gonna see this happen. And think about what the industry, as we're taking out our crystal ball, think about what the industry has already survived. Okay, right. We had the rescission of the Cole Memorandum, okay, in the Trump administration, which was not actively looking to legalize cannabis, where more cannabis legalization happened. So what I would submit to you is that going forward, there are much smoother sailing ahead than there was prior to this. So we remain very excited about the prospects of federal legalization.
I think one of our speakers talks about the issue as being one that's more generational than cuts across party lines. Is that really, I think, one of the things that's driving the bipartisan support in the House and in the Senate?
Yeah, younger voters, this is not going to be an issue to younger voters. In fact, when I explain to my children that marijuana wasn't legal, likely when they are old enough to know, to have a sense of what's going on in society, I think that they likely will find it surprising that marijuana was illegal, in the same way that I would found it surprising that alcohol would have been illegal, and learning about prohibition in history classes. I suspect that there's going to be a very similar reaction to that, because the younger people right now, and especially in the younger demographics, if you're looking sort of 25 to, when you're in the 30s, a more millennial generation, they really don't see what the big deal is with marijuana and marijuana legalization.
Right.
And that's the same issue. And those issues are moving, and it's hard to convince. Yeah, traditionally it's been more conservative Republican voters, but you could go on the Democratic side. If you look at older Democratic voters, those too have been slower to adopt marijuana legalization, though all of the demographics have moved pretty quickly. When you look at younger demographics, it's just like not an issue to them. This is, it should be legal. We're talking 70-80%. No questions. No question about that. So things are definitely moving the right direction.
Well, Michael, I want to thank you for the benefit of your insight and the opportunity to spend some time with you. We all obviously look forward to the next opportunity to get together in person. And for the viewers, Michael's joining us this afternoon from suburban Philadelphia. I'm coming to you from the shores of Georgian Bay, north of Toronto, a couple of hours, and our technical assistance is provided by James Black, who's in Newmarket, Ontario. So as virtual as you can get. Michael, again, on behalf of our viewers, thanks for sharing your insight this afternoon, and we look forward to a long and continued association with the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for having me, and thank you for all of your work.
That's great music. I love it. We need to keep using that.
Oh, definitely.
That was so interesting. So I want to say a few things before you set up our next one. I looked it up quickly, and this really blows me away, the SAFE Act. I mean, when the SAFE Act finally goes through and banking finally happens for cannabis companies in the US, I think the banks are going to go crazy. So it's estimated that legal cannabis is estimated at $41 billion a year in the US, and illicit cannabis is still at $100 billion US a year. So you got to imagine that that's coming from states where it's not legalized yet, and there obviously would still be some gray market. But the banks they must be going insane that they can't participate in, $140 billion industry every year.
Oh, absolutely. It still represents one of the greatest opportunities around.
Totally. And what I really liked at the end, what he said is, as far as looking forward, what the cannabis sector's already survived, the barrier to entry is only going to be easier, as we go forward.
Well, exactly. And just look at the last 5 years. I'm very, very excited to see what the next 5 years have in store. And really quick piece of trivia. There was a person on that panel who was a recipient of the Captain of Industry Award. Anna, do you know who that was?
On the panel of two people?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take a guess here that it was Michael Bronstein.
Close.
Sorry, Richard.
Richard was actually presented as the Captain of Industry Award by Michael Bronstein at the MJ Biz conference, which was held in Las Vegas very early in the morning. I think it was like at 7 a.m. But
it was I remember that year. And you know
Yes.
what? A shout out to Richard. Richard made a difficult decision quite a few years ago to let U.S. cannabis companies that were in a jurisdiction that was legal to list with the CSE. And well done, Richard. It's been an amazing few years.
Oh, absolutely. Perpetual winner of the Captain of Industry Award is our very own Richard Carleton, internally
Absolutely.
and externally. But moving on.
Barrington, what's next?
We are going to move towards the path to U.S. legalization. And with that, I would like to introduce you to Sahar Ayinehsazian from Vicente Sederberg, Senior Associate Attorney Co-Chair of Banking and Financial Services Access Group, and Mr. David Culver, Vice President of U.S. Government and Stakeholder Relations from Canopy Growth. Hi, welcome to the Cannabis Investor Series. I'm your host, Barrington Miller from the Canadian Securities Exchange. And today I have a special presentation. We want to talk about and we want to find out and learn about U.S. legalization. You don't want to hear from me. Let's talk to the experts. I'm joined by David Culver and Sahar Ayinehsazian. David is from Canopy Growth. He is the VP of U.S. Government and Stakeholder Relations, bringing over 20 years of federal experience to the Canopy team. In his role, David manages all day-to-day U.S. federal and state engagement for Canopy Growth. Prior to joining Canopy, he served in a variety of campaign and legislative positions for Senators Robert C. Byrd, Tom Daschle, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and J. Robert Kerry and Ben Nelson. He previously served as a VP of Government Affairs for the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States. David holds a Bachelor of Arts in Government from Hamilton College and resides with his wife in Washington, D.C. Moving on to Sahar. And if you've been a fan of the show, Sahar was on almost 1 year ago at the inaugural Cannabis Investor Series. Sahar is an attorney with Vicente Sederberg's Los Angeles office, where she focuses on cannabis banking, corporate transactions, and regulations. With her specialized knowledge, Sahar helped to establish currently co-leads Vicente Sederberg's Banking and Financial Services Department. As a member of the National Cannabis Industry Association's Banking Access Committee, Sahar also works on strategy and educational advocacy to enable state licensed businesses to obtain accounts at depository institutions. She holds a Bachelor of Arts with honors from the University of California, San Diego, and a law degree from Loyola Law School, where she was a Loyola Scholar. Okay, thank you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be with you.
I want to jump right in, and this is just going to be a discussion, and I'm not going to be talking much, and I'll leave it to the experts. But what does U.S. legalization mean, and what does it look like?
Currently, cannabis is listed as a Schedule I substance pursuant to the Controlled Substances Act. Schedule I substances are wholly illegal. They have no medical purpose, no recognized medical purpose, and you can't, on a federal level, even prescribe them. And so legalization, in my opinion, would mean that cannabis is either descheduled, which means that it's no longer on a schedule of substances pursuant to the CSA, or rescheduled, which means that it's put onto a different schedule of substances pursuant to the CSA, such that there is some acknowledged use for it federally.
Over to you.
Yeah, well, I think that she laid out the fundamentals just perfectly. And really the political discussion that is going on right now as it relates to President Biden is really that question of whether or not we should be talking about descheduling in its entirety, which to me is really what legalization should be about. And certainly my company believes that. But the president's rhetoric has suggested that he's not willing to go that far. And so he's suggested that we establish more research, and we also talk about moving it to Schedule 2 or potentially Schedule 3, which is something that his administration could do through executive order. So that political rhetoric is not something that we've heard while he's actually been president of the United States. It was during the campaign, and he talked about decriminalization, as did his vice presidential selection during that time period. They haven't really addressed cannabis at all. Since he's been in the White House, they've been tackling the pandemic and preparing to restart the economy. But that's really the debate that's going on right now, Barrington.
A few weeks ago, New York legalized. That's all you saw in the headlines. Being in different countries, you think, okay, everything's legal. What does that actually mean, not only for the state, but for the industry as a whole?
So I think it's really important that we recognize a very basic point, which is that even though there are states that have legalized cannabis for recreational purposes, that does not change the federal stance, because federal law in the United States still trumps state law. And so even though cannabis now, for example, with respect to New York, is state legal, it is still federally illegal. But what that means as far as legalization goes is that there has been state law passed with respect to the recreational use of cannabis for adults. So we forthcoming will have regulations that will control licensing of various different sectors of the industry with respect to the state. So, licensing of cultivators, licensing of manufacturing, licensing of retailers, rules about sales, rules about distribution and delivery, everything really that drills down to the day-to-day activities of these businesses. And these rules, as the framework for really every other state legalization has previously done, will very closely follow what used to be the 8 enforcement priorities of the Cole memo, because those have generally been recognized as low enforcement priorities for the federal government when it comes to cannabis, even though the Cole memo has not been in play since, I think, January 4th, 2018. So again, we have state legalization, does not mean federal legalization. Rules will be forthcoming as far as licensure, but it's not that, you can just go anywhere now and buy cannabis and you can just grow it anywhere and sell it to anyone. It's going to be very, very strictly and heavily regulated.
Yeah, I'll just add to all that, which is exactly right. We're probably 18 months away from seeing a legal sale of cannabis in New York State. But New York State has gotten so much attention because it's such an important market domestically. It's got an enormous population. It's got New York City. It's going to be a market driver for brands that are coming out of that state. So we as a company are really excited about it. Let's also think about this in terms of what's happened in the last 6 months. This is the 7th state to come online in the last 6 months, which is incredible. And what's happened is you've seen this regional impact. So New Jersey legalized. Well, New York wants to legalize too, right? And so does Pennsylvania, and so does Connecticut, and all these other regional states, because they're all touching and they want to be able to capture that tax revenue. So they had no choice but start to expedite in order to make sure that New Jersey wasn't the only one that was going to reap the benefits of cannabis. And also federally, let's look at some of these other states. Let's pick on South Dakota. That happened through ballot initiative after the election, right? Or during the election, whereas it was one of 4 states that legalized recreational. That was a part of a ballot initiative. So that is going to put pressure on these federal elected officials and state elected officials to change their position on cannabis. And in a very conservative state like South Dakota, that could be really helpful as we start to think about the possibilities for cannabis reform this year and next. Let me also make the point, the business interests that are non-cannabis, that are established in the United States, are already starting to line up and looking very, very closely at the cannabis industry, how they can participate in it, what the reform is going to look like, what sort of oversight federally there's going to be, and how their individual company or industry can participate. I mean, this is when we flip the switch in the US, this is most likely going to be almost as big as the beer industry or somewhere near there. So there's going to be a lot of interest. And I always like to say that when the money and the politics cross, the money's going to win. So you're going to have a very strange group of folks on the field getting ready for this reform discussion, which is coming soon on Capitol Hill. That's going to have everybody from the left that I referenced earlier, all the way to those as far right as you possibly can be, because they want to be a part of this industry, because it's brand new and it's going to be something that creates a lot of wealth across many different lanes.
And I'm curious, in your opinion, who's going to be the biggest agent of change, the biggest non-cannabis related directly agent of change pushing for it? Basically follow the money, and who's going to benefit the most? Just your opinion. I'm not going to hold you to it, but where do you think it's going to come from?
Look at who's invested significantly in the cannabis sector right now. So we know, I'll pick on my company. Our largest investor is Constellation. That's a total beverage alcohol company based here in the United States. So they are going to have an interest in this. Let's think about some other industries that have invested. Tobacco certainly has. Let's think about industries that want to be a part of this. So convenience stores, other big box retailers that eventually would like to get into the game, wholesalers. So those that distribute the product from the producer to the retail location. This is an opportunity for them to expand their business as well. So the list is almost endless, Barrington, of folks that are very well established industries that are going to want to be a part of this once the U.S. formally legalizes.
David, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are with respect to where the pharmaceutical industry stands, because it could go two very, very different ways, which is they either see cannabis as being this, deeply problematic threat to their business model versus they're able to hop on to the research train essentially and make a really, really great profit given both, the vast amount of possibilities that cannabis has when it comes to medical possibilities, as well as just how much of an interest there is right now in using cannabis as almost an alternative form of medicine to get away from more established Western medicine like opiates, for example, that have over and over again shown that there's just a whole slew of issues with them.
Yeah, well, I think it's already been established that cannabis can be a pharmaceutical. We've all been watching and reading about the benefits of Epidiolex. And I think that there will be plenty of other pharmaceutical companies that or if they're not looking at it already, which I'm assuming that they are, they will be, because it absolutely can be an opioid substitute. And this is a massive and horrible national issue that every elected official is having to face in their congressional district and in their state. So I think that's one piece of it. Ultimately, I feel like it's going to come down to how the federal government regulates it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the answer exactly will be in terms of the role for FDA or for the U.S. Treasury. Is there a split between the two? Does one agency, and I'm specifically referencing the Tax and Trade Bureau, which is the primary regulator for alcohol, did they have the bulk of the authority, or does the FDA have it? Is there a split between the two? And again, I don't know what that regulatory structure is going to look like until this Senate package comes out for debate and discussion, most likely in May.
Yeah, I think I don't know that there has ever really been another substance that has had so much promise, both with respect to adult recreational use, as well as vast amounts of possibilities with respect to the medical use. And so I think that that's both something that goes in favor of cannabis, but that can also hold up what we hope to see as federal legalization, because there's so many different angles to support it from, but then there's so many questions of how exactly do we regulate something that's both medicinal as well as something akin to beer, for example, that adults can just enjoy as they wish.
I'm playing around with the idea, not my own original idea, but that companies may not necessarily want full federal legalization. And the reason for that has to do with the business models that they've currently been working under. And that's within each individual state. And by opening up the states, they have to change their business models and all of those things.
Let me answer from my company's perspective first, which is Canopy Growth is 110% in favor of full comprehensive cannabis reform, which we expect to see the Senate introduce this May, and then potentially act on later this year. We certainly hope they will. Are we for safe banking? Absolutely, we're for that. But we have this really unique opportunity to go for full-blown reform this Congress, and we might as well take advantage of it. And it's important to do that because we can look back and we can start to repair the wrongs of the past in a very forward-looking way, right? So that's our belief as a company. Now, are there other companies out there that have a different belief? 100%. And why is it that they're concerned? They're concerned because of this whole idea that's within the US Constitution. This is not something that Canopy came up with. It's called interstate commerce. And that's not going away. And we've got a really smart attorney on the phone here. I can't wait to hear her take on it. But it's going to start, eventually you're going to see interstate commerce as a part of reform once it gets done. And there's going to be a product that's exchanged from one state to the other. And if there are some business models that are out there that are very inward looking, very inward focused, they're able to be a big player in a single market or multiple markets, but that's their focus, that's their business model. So when lower cost product that starts coming in from other states into their state, that could potentially be a big disruptor. But they know that, those that are writing this bill, and they're going to write it in a way that doesn't disrupt that market right away. It's going to be I think, a fairly lengthy transition. But let me just be abundantly clear as I pass the mic to my legal counsel here on the bottom left of the screen, that the interstate commerce piece is a part of the Constitution. This is not something that some of these other companies have cooked up and tried to put in the bill.
The reality of things is that David is very right. There are companies right now who are successfully operating in a state-by-state business model, which is something that the current status of the industry and current federal law has forced them to do. And it's working out very, very well for them. For example, you'll see things like trademarks and IP licenses being something that's very, very valuable in large part because you can't move cannabis across state lines. And so you have to be able to have others in different states create products under your brand where you can't do it. Query as to whether that business model will still be as necessary and as successful once you are able to have interstate commerce if federal legalization goes that way. And so I think that it is a business protective viewpoint to want to protect the business model that's working for you, which right now, the only business model that works in the cannabis space on a nationwide level is that state-by-state siloed model. And I do think we're going to see resistance from those companies for whom this state-by-state siloed non-interstate commerce model has been working really well.
Yeah, if I can just comment on a couple things.
Please.
I first of all, I love the work that Last Prisoner Project is doing, and we need to make sure that what we do federally deals with the expungement of records. I've had to really educate myself about the number of people of color that have been put in prison for nonviolent cannabis offenses whose lives have been ruined. And it's to the point where I'm furious about it. And I'm going to work to the best of my ability all day, every day, to make sure that they address this on the federal level. And I know my company is behind me in this regard because I'm appalled at what this country has done and used this plant for in terms of putting people of color in prison. So that's my rant on that piece, and more on that to come next time we speak, because I think you're going to see in the Senate package that's coming out soon a very robust set of language that tackles this directly. Let me also say, though, that in terms of the state-by-state model, yes, that's where we are now. Will interstate commerce be a disruptor? Absolutely. But I come from beverage alcohol, and I got to see the small distillers, as for instance, develop there were 50 licensed spirits producers in the United States when I started almost 20 years ago. There's now over 2,000. I don't know the exact number, but it's a massive increase. And the model that these folks have, it's a lot of local models because people really like to consume locally, right? They want to know what's being made in their community. They want to enjoy it, and there's a local story, and that's really cool. But there's also this massive market outside of their locality, domestically, and then also internationally. And over a period of time, if the US passes reform this year, it's going to drive half of the rest of the world. Now, maybe not some big bloc countries that are very much opposed to cannabis at this point in the game, but we're going to have a market outside of the United States as well for these producers that are already established to look into. And I would always talk to the small distillers about 95% of their market is actually outside of their locality, and let's take advantage of it. And they did. So I try to paint the picture as a very positive one, and something that if you're an existing operator, you're going to be able to reap the rewards of. And that interstate commerce shouldn't be something that is this scary boogeyman that's going to be a massive market disruptor for your company.
Oh, absolutely.
I think with all things cannabis, the key really is education. You only take away the fear, you only take away the often illogical reasonings with the kind of education and enlightenment that David has touched on.
Well, I know one person on this panel who has become enlightened. I just want to say, on behalf of the Canadian Securities Exchange, on behalf of myself, David, Sahar, thank you for sharing your time, your wisdom, your friendship, your availability, all of that, not only to me, but to our audience, to our listeners. Thank you. David, thank you. Please continue to be safe. And I think I have a feeling we'll be getting together again and discussing this more in depth, because there's just so much to cover, and I like talking to you guys. So thank you.
Thanks for having us. We're going to have a full-blown Senate package in the very near future. Have us back in to talk about what that looks like. I'd certainly love to participate.
Done and done. You don't even have to ask. And Sahar, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, you have to come too. So
whenever is good for you folks is always good for me. It is an absolute pleasure to get to talk about so many different things with people who are so well educated and just really deeply understand the subject. So thank you guys.
Anna, do you know that when I do this job, I sometimes forget of just how fortunate I am, because I get to hear great content, meet great people. I'd like to thank Michael, Richard, Sahar, David for sharing your insights and for kicking off the Cannabis Investor Series. As well, I'd like to thank our partners, Benzinga Cannabis, for all that you've done, because events like this couldn't be possible without you. With that, I want to turn it over to Anna. And where are we going next?
We're going traveling, Barrington. We haven't done it in a year.
Wow.
So we're going to do it today.
Where are we starting?
So we're going to go beyond the headlines. We're going to go into some of the key states, and we're going to talk to some of the corporate leaders. A lot of these, or I think almost all of them, are CSE issuers. Thank you so much. We have the most amazing issuers, Barrington. They're incredibly intelligent. I think both you and I felt putting this together, over the period of the month, we have over 60 speakers, and people are so willing to talk with us. And I can't thank everyone enough for their participation. We are going to start in California. We're going to make our way through to Nevada, Colorado, and Illinois.
California, what's your distribution network like? Because that's also another point of interest within the industry is, okay, you have product, you got brand, but now you got to get it to people.
There's this thought in California that all you need to do is just create a great brand, and if you put it on shelves, people will buy it, and then the wheel will just start rolling down the hill, or the ball will just start rolling down the hill and build faster and faster. The reality is, if you don't deliver on your customers' expectations, and your customers in this case are your dispensary partners, if you don't deliver on their expectations and you leave them hanging, you might as well just fold up tent and go home. And so our distribution footprint, our network is all about making sure that a customer gets everything they've asked for, gets it in a timely basis, and gets ample communication. And they understand exactly what to expect. And so one of the things that I really liked about the business that we took over a year ago was that it had its own distribution capabilities, and that's its own distribution hubs and infrastructure and trucks and machinery and technology, all to make sure that our customers get what they want when they want it. And that's not easy in California. It takes, for us, it's 2 distribution hubs in both NorCal and SoCal, and each with several, a dozen or so trucks running all the time, making deliveries and picking up cash. That's not easy to do. And it's one of the places in California where if you don't have that level of infrastructure and you rely on third-party vendors, those third-party vendors make it very hard to crack into the space, and it's almost impossible. So it's one of those, it's unfortunately becoming in California one of those stories where you won't get attention unless you're big enough. And there's only 2 ways to be big enough. It's you can spend yourself into oblivion trying to get the story out there, or you can build the infrastructure. There's really no substitute for that.
Hi, my name is Margot Micallef. I'm the founder and CEO of GABY Inc. GABY trades on the CSE under the trading symbol GABY and on the OTC under the trading symbol GABLF. GABY is a consolidator of retail dispensaries exclusively focused on the state of California. We recently completed a major transaction in the acquisition of one of the largest dispensaries in California called Mankind. Mankind did $28 million US in revenue last year and $5.5 million US in EBITDA. GABY decided to move into the retail space once we realized how fragmented the California market is. Most operations operate a single location, and there is no dominant retailer in California. There's also opportunity for greenfield licenses in that only 20% of the available municipalities currently have licensing criteria in place. Many are coming on board on a regular stream, and as they do, we will be ready to apply for new licenses in those jurisdictions. We have a strong foundation in the Mankind dispensary, and we have a California-only focus.
Hi, I'm Andriyko Herchak, and I'm the CEO of FinCanna Capital. And we invest in American companies operating in the U.S. licensed cannabis industry, and our focus is on California, which is the largest market in the U.S. and the world. We have a diversified portfolio with a very strong investment in co-manufacturing. And with 2 of our investments, we essentially produce everything that is sold on dispensary shelves for a large number of in-state and multi-state brands in California. Now, we make returns for our shareholders in 2 ways. First of all, we earn recurring royalty revenues every month, which are calculated as fixed percentages of the revenues of the companies we invest in. And secondly, we have change of control clauses that would see us receiving a very significant percentage of the gross sales price when our companies are sold. And these percentages range from 25% to 100% of the sales proceeds. And as a result of the November 2020 US election, there has never been a better time to invest in US cannabis. The market and experts are expecting a path toward decriminalization and eventually legalization, which would be such a major catalyst for explosive growth.
Plus is a cannabis manufacturing company. We are based in California. We have presence both in California and Nevada. What we've really focused on is making high quality, greatly branded products that we can deliver to consumers to help them solve real problems. And we do that by focusing on including the right cannabinoids, whether that's THC or CBD, and getting them into as many of our customers' hands as we can, and getting that mixture right so it is the exact same every time for them. And that's plus. Something that's, constantly said, but still incredibly true in California, especially for those of us who live here, is that more than 70% of the market is still a black market. We are competing as a brand for shelf space in the 600 stores that exist. Colorado has more than 5 times as many stores as California. They don't have 5 times the number of people that we have in California. We have quite a few more here in California, but we don't have as many stores because regulators have not stepped in to shut down the illegal stores, especially during coronavirus. A lot of that regulation was put on pause. That seems to be changing recently. In California, they have consolidated the 3 agencies into one agency. Of course, bureaucracy is always slow, but multiple bureaucracies are even slower. And so that change, I think, is actually going to start to move the needle in terms of the number of legal dispensaries that we have here in the state. Another thing that's happening is there's a bill through our legislature here in California that is going to actually enable the state to have more places have the ability to open dispensaries. Right now, we've got an odd patchwork where either a county or a city or other jurisdictions can object to a dispensary being built. And that means that it's very difficult to get a license. Some of that looks like it will be made more clear and easier. And so if that happens, I think we're going to see a huge change in California where that 70% illegal is probably going to switch to the legal side. We're going to see the equal growth over there. So I think that's a big opportunity for the state. I also just think it's a big opportunity for customers. The amount of pesticides and just dangerous things going on in the black market is quite high. My family comes from the food manufacturing industry. I'll tell you, even at food manufacturing companies that you think would be are fully regulated and FDA compliant, you would think wouldn't be scary at all. Even some of them are scary. So when there are no requirements, it's really bad.
We got our start as one of the first medical cultivators and producers in the state. And if you go back to the origins, and I think to a certain extent, Nevada is a really sort of paints the story of cannabis in the United States and the expansion of cannabis really well. Because if you went to Nevada 10 years ago, cannabis was very illegal. You would get in a lot of trouble if you had a joint or you had cannabis on you. And when they first opened up for medical, it was a tiny little market. I think they started out with less than 10,000 medical cards. And there was an early group who really fostered the medical scene. And like a lot of these early states, there was this co-opetition. Everyone was trying to help each other out because everyone wanted legalization to work. Everyone wanted the medical program to work, both at the sort of grower level and the producer level, at the dispensary level, and at the state level as well. And slowly the medical cards grew. And Nevada was actually the fastest state to transition from medical to adult use in those earlier states. And, if anybody who goes to Vegas, once a year, once every couple of years, will kind of remember that, there was nothing about cannabis 10 years ago. And then kind of 5 years ago, maybe you saw a billboard or you saw a dispensary. And then 2 or 3 years ago, you started seeing it on taxi cabs and billboards. And now it's a very prevalent part of the Las Vegas culture. So it's been really interesting to see the adoption. And I think that really mirrors the normalization of cannabis across the general population. I mean, some of the more recent studies that have come out, there's a Pew Research study that came out recently. We're in the very, very large majority. I think the last one was 90% of people, think that some form of cannabis should be legalized. So we've seen this huge attitude shift that I think, is really mirrored in what we've seen in Nevada.
So Fiore Cannabis, we're a U.S. multi-state operator, and we've got revenue-generating operations in Las Vegas with our 10,000 square foot cultivation and production facility. And we're also active with our retail dispensary in the Coachella Valley in Desert Hot Springs, California. A bit of a turnaround story. Happy to report that in 2020, we basically cleaned up a lot of debt from the balance sheet. We brought in a lot of new investors. We started the new year 2021 taking our organic living soil platform into the Las Vegas market on a reboot, and happy to report that we had a profitable January, February, and March, also looking strong because of the high demand for organic flower in the Las Vegas marketplace. We were able to get our store in the Coachella Valley profitable in late Q4 last year, so towards the end of the year. And we're looking for positive momentum this year based upon sound business fundamentals, and that is low debt. Any type of capital that we're going to need to raise in terms of expansion will be accretive. And we've got profitable operations, and we intend to be profitable on a quarter-over-quarter basis. So some good days ahead for Fiore Cannabis, and very excited to be moving forward.
Hello, my name is Paul Rosen. I am the Chief Executive Officer and the Chairman of 1933 Industries. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with 1933 Industries, but let me give you a succinct overview. Based in lovely Las Vegas, Nevada, 1933 Industries is a premium cultivator and manufacturer of a pretty wide range of cannabis-infused form factors. We operate out of a 68,000 square foot state-of-the-art premium indoor craft cannabis facility where we have 602 grow lights, and we produce some of the highest quality cannabis in the state of Nevada. We produce pre-rolls, premium flower in 1/8 jars, and premium flower in half-ounce bags. In addition to our flower, which, by the way, is 62% of the Nevada market, we also produce a wide range of manufactured concentrates, including dabs, shatters, waxes, and vape pens. Those two assets make up the bulk of our Nevada-based business. But in addition, we own and operate a CBD hemp division called Hemp, which is able to ship its products across the United States, and in fact, even internationally. Hemp, without THC content, is able to produce a wide range of CBD products, including topical balms, relief creams, soon to be launching gummies. And we're really finding that the ability to reach beyond Las Vegas through Hemp is a great advantage for us. If anyone is planning on coming to Vegas in the near future, I hope you are. The city has bounced back heroically from COVID and is really set up right now across the entire cannabis economy for probably some of the best months ever in the history of the Nevada cannabis economy. I would encourage anyone that makes it to Vegas to come visit us at 1933 Industries, or certainly attend most of the dispensaries in Las Vegas where you can buy our premium products. We're so thrilled about the future for the entire Nevada economy as it really rebounds starting from COVID. But really, in our opinion, Nevada is one of the great cannabis markets in the world right now, both because of the resilient domestic market, but also because of the strong return to tourism. So we're super excited about what 1933 has for the future, and we're certainly hopeful that some of you will come along for the ride by investing. Until next time, thank you so much.
So talk to us behind the sort of conception of this large Charlie and the Chocolate Factory style dispensary in Las Vegas. How did you guys come up with this concept?
Well, Bob, my partner, and I, Bob Grossbeck, who's my co-CEO, and again, he'd been my attorney for 30 years. And again, I met him on the Henderson City Council. I was city councilman, he was mayor. We remained friends. He represented me. And he saw that they were going to legalize cannabis for medical. Didn't know anything about it. We thought, why don't we get into it? Don't we wish we were around for when the gaming was legalized in 1931, when prohibition ended? This is like a chance in 5 lifetimes. So more guts than brains. We got into it, and thank God it went recreational the next year. And we opened our first small store, and we did very high-end still. It was, I think, one of the nicest stores in town. Very busy, doing 18 million the first 10 months out of 2,500 square feet, but soon realized, do we want to compete with the other 43 dispensaries for 2.3 million locals? Or we've got 55 million tourists coming to town here. Why don't we go closer to the Strip? Bob and I, being in town for over 100 years together in Las Vegas, we thought it's a normal thing. That wouldn't everybody do this? So you can't be in the gaming corridor in the Las Vegas Strip. That's about a mile either side. Us being in government before, we went and checked the zoning. There was a bubble where they had went around it. We went door to door, found our site here, decided we're going to build a superstore and go to the tourists and show them that what we can do for them. Everybody wants to be entertained. It's our job to entertain them.
Yeah.
So it just grew from there to being the largest in the world in entertaining people.
So what has the sentiment been, obviously, from the residents and consumers that come? Because Las Vegas is such a different type of market that I would say you guys have the residents, the locals that are there that come, day by day, week by week, month by month. But then majority of your business would also come from the tourists, obviously, that come into Vegas for the 5 days, the week, or whatever it might be, and then they fly back home. So what's the sentiment been like from the local community?
We really only had about 14% locals pre-COVID. And then when COVID hit and they literally shut us down, we had to rotate immediately and go 100% locals.
Yeah.
So we did that very quickly. We're pretty limber ourselves, Bob and I. We'll get on the problem we have and correct it. So we bought 30 vehicles immediately, hired 100 drivers, and we went 100% locals. That now it's changing and going back as COVID is changing over. We will probably be at about 20% locals and 80% tourists from Thursday through Sunday. And then Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we'll be at about 50% locals and 50% tourists. And that'll change again as COVID slowly goes away and we go back to normal. And so that's it's spreading so fast, and that's why we have these events for people to see the special effects. The first thing to do when they ask them to do a video, take all the videos and pictures you want. First thing to do is send to their friends. You got to see this place. You can't believe it. And Twitters and social media, and now it's spreading so fast, and that's why even the few people that came to Vegas during COVID, that's why we were still so busy. Last October was our busiest month, I remember, in the history of Planet 13 in the middle of COVID.
What is special about Colorado, and where does it fit into the regional play, whether it's a East Coast, West Coast thing, or maybe it's just its own distinct bubble, as it were? So, let's go to Colorado.
Colorado's super unique for a few reasons. First and foremost, we were first. If nothing else, we started down the journey before anybody else did, particularly with adult use on January 1st of 2014. It was voted on and passed by the voters of this great state, November of 2012. So not only did we have a first mover advantage, but Colorado also has several other unique things as a market that do make it special. And isn't it strange to think about, there's 37 million people in California. There's less than 6 million people in Colorado, and yet we're number two. Now, California is, a much, much larger market, so not taking anything away from that. But there are some things in Colorado that make it a really unique and valuable market. First and foremost is you have a consumer base here that is really savvy. You can't just walk in with any product here. At the height of maybe 2016, somewhere in there, I think there were 155 vape pen brands that showed up statistically in the analytics. Now I think there's about 30. Proud to say that OPEN, our flagship vaporizing brand, has been number one literally since they've kept score. And we are flexing on Barrington. We are 2.5 times.
That's what you should do.
The number two brand. If you take, 2 or 3 folks underneath us and add them all up, they still don't add up to us. So, but why is that? So a couple of things. A, we were the first out of the gate to do it. Yep. We've been extracting oil since 2010. So it gave us a long lead time to be able to establish that brand loyalty with consumers. 2, another great thing about Colorado is you have really good price dynamics here relative to a place like, say, Oregon or Oklahoma, that smaller population, smaller tourism numbers, a lot of people in the industry, overproduced, which obviously puts downward pressure on price. one of the things that people, are aware of, but they don't really think about with the Colorado market. Think about how many people travel here, whether it's for ski season, whether it's to go hike mountains, whether it's for a concert at Red Rocks, pandemic year aside, obviously, that generally speaking, Colorado is one of the most highly traveled states in the country. And obviously a lot of those people come here and love this beautiful playground just to the west of me in the Rocky Mountains. And then they love to enjoy that while they experience cannabis and in pretty high frequency. That's with one of our products. So it was first. It's highly competitive. Like if you look around the country of brands that have left their home state and traveled across the land, an inordinate amount of those come from Colorado. Why is that? Much like a restaurant in New York City, you better be damn good if you want to play ball here. And what that does, that iron sharpens iron, and ultimately the people that have won have been able to recreate that success in other places. And that's because of the place where we started, highly competitive, good pricing dynamics, and a lot of people come to experience it. Like I can't tell you how often we hear either on social or I get on LinkedIn, whatever. Hey, I was in Aspen, with my family ski trip. I had District Edibles, or I had a Firefly Mini, and then I was out at the beach in California, and then I was at a bachelorette party in Las Vegas, and you guys are everywhere. And right.
Is special about Illinois, and how is it different than the other areas?
We could talk for a long time about Illinois. I'm proud of the state for displaying thought leadership over the last 8 years in really impacting the way that this industry develops. Illinois, back in 2013, when it passed its Compassionate Use Medical Act, it was a game changer. That they really did create generation 2 of cannabis in the US, which was highly regulated, compliance focused, and sort of a controlled, limited license type environment that you had to earn your way into. You had to compete in merit-based application processes. And so that approach to cannabis really was the start of the normalization and professionalization, right? When they really wanted to make sure that this was true medical program with professional operators and a way that they could make sure that this type of industry walked before it ran. And then they backed that up in 2019 when they developed another kind of game-changing adult use structure. First state in the U.S. to pass an adult use law through the legislative process, not through a ballot initiative or voter referendum. So it was very thoughtful, it was very thorough, and it prioritized social equity and restorative justice, and then followed that with a focus on the tax and regulate side of it. And again, game changing. It's been now the model for, and I think it will continue to be for any new adult use law that gets passed in the U.S. is gonna prioritize a more inclusive, diverse social equity approach to the industry. So enough about Illinois and how I am proud. It's my home state and resident here, so I like the approach that it's brought to cannabis. It's why I'm in the industry. If Illinois hadn't done what it did in 2013, I would not be in the industry. So I have to give it a lot of credit. But what you're seeing is a very robust adult use market here develop in a very short period of time because of the thoughtfulness and also because of the level of execution that you have. That is sort of founded and operated, headquartered, I should say, in the state. You've got arguably probably 5 of the 10 premier companies in the entire industry, regardless of country, all started here in Chicago. So, $1 billion plus run rate in the first year of adult use. So it's a successful model. Of course, there's still room to improve in areas where they need to catch up. But a great model, great program. It's nice to be part of the development of it, right, and be based out of here, and be able to obtain the number one market share position, which is what we've tried to obtain in every market that we're in. This was the first one. So Illinois is great. It acts as sort of a nice hub in the Midwest of the country. And it is kind of a bridge between the West and the East. So it'll have a prominent role in cannabis going forward.
I have to say, big shout out to James Black. This is amazing video production that you've done, James. You might have another career ahead of you. That was so interesting, and we're going to carry on across the country. Before we do, everything that you're seeing here today, other than our issuer videos, is typically a lot longer. It was really hard for us to cut it down so that we could give this all to you in a 2-hour window. So if you go to CSE TV on YouTube and you hit the subscribe button, when those full videos get loaded, you will get notified. So make sure you do that after. Barrington, what's next?
Great points, Anna. And we are going to continue this trek across the country. As mentioned earlier, our sponsor for this week is Benzinga Cannabis. And we had the privilege of Benzinga actually hosting a Michigan panel. Detroit Rock City, Patrick Lane from Benzinga, Fabian Monaco from Gage, and Mr. Brad Rogers, Red, White, and Bloom. Afterwards, we'll travel along the eastern seaboard, East Coast, New York, Pennsylvania, and we will end off in Florida with Trulieve. So without further ado, I am turning it over to Mr. Patrick Lane of Benzinga, Michigan panel. Take it away.
My baby's got what you ain't never seen. When it comes to poppin', she's my juke joint queen. But I say my baby likes to.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to the CSE, Barrington, and team for hosting us. I have the great pleasure of introducing Brad Rogers, the CEO of Red, White, and Bloom. Ticker there is RWB. And Fabian Monaco, CEO of Gage Cannabis. Ticker there is GAGE. GAGE. Gents, how's it going?
Couldn't be better.
Yeah?
We're in a pandemic, and we're an essential business, and we're providing great service to medical and rec now, in the great state of Michigan, among other states. But I think we're here to focus on that. So, couldn't be happier really right now.
I love that. What about you, Fabian? You all right?
Yeah, I also can't complain. Echo Brad's comments. We're seeing a lot of growth coming out of the Michigan market. Phenomenal numbers that were released last night, making Michigan now the third largest market in the U.S., only behind California and Colorado, close to a $2 billion run rate. Not a lot of complaining from people of Michigan, especially from Brad and I, when you look at the Michigan market and how it's performing.
Damn straight, my friend. Damn straight. Well, listen, let's jump right into it, you guys. We're here to discuss Michigan. We're here to discuss investing in the American cannabis market for sure, but Michigan and what the opportunity is there. So I'm going to rattle off some quick numbers, right? I think we all saw the report come out, but just in case our audience here didn't, the March breakdown for 2021 has sales up about 179% to just under $146 million, right? That's up, let's see, about 41 million from February, and about 38 million from January, right? Medical sales up 59% to around 51 million total, and adult rec sales up 346% from the prior year to just under 98 million bucks. That's pretty damn good for the Midwest market. What do you think, guys? Any initial reactions to that?
Yeah, I think there's been nothing but positive traction, and the way they've rolled it out has been, the caregiver program, and then they've evolved from that into the front line. The regulatory piece has gotten stiffer with respect to what the criteria is to pass product, et cetera. So that it sort of slowly emerged into a really controlled market that has a lot of good aspects to it that we're now adapting to be able to actually take it from seed all the way to sale, or cutting to customer, however you want to call it, in a vertical space that that there's a ton of margin in and an insatiable demand. So it's been a fun ride, and there's more to come because it hasn't even gone full rec yet there. So lots of upside still to that state. Even those numbers are small as far as I'm concerned. So I'm sure Fabian has a lot to say about that as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're seeing tremendous growth in Michigan, 105 million total sales last month and almost 146 this month. You're seeing tremendous growth in rec. Keep in mind, rec almost $100 million month, and yet only 100 out of the 1,700 municipalities have opted in for rec sales. You're looking at what, 1/17th of the potential.
Insane.
And yet, you have so many other companies out there touting, the benefits of all these markets that they're in. And yet, Michigan gets absolutely no love whatsoever. You look at the total addressable market today, third largest market, almost a $2 billion run rate, as I mentioned. We're just seeing so much demand coming from Michigan. The medical market, as Brad mentioned, phenomenal job at the caregiver model, really built up Michigan to be the second largest medical cardholder system, only behind California for many, many years. And now you have this massive medical base that is supporting just a huge influx in rec buying and, new rec consumers coming to the store pretty much on a daily basis. And I think, like Brad said, we're only getting started. And when you're looking at 1/17th of the municipalities opting in for rec and seeing what the numbers are today, gives you a small indication of where Michigan's actually going.
Yeah, let's dive into that for a second, because I think that's really interesting. And I think the goal here should be for us to highlight some advantages, some challenges of the Michigan market and how you guys are facing those head on with each of your companies. But let's figure out exactly what that means. So adult rec sales are permitted in around 100 municipalities in Michigan. There are 1,764 municipalities in the state of Michigan. I know, I live here. So does Fabian, kind of. But here's the thing, you guys. When it comes to these municipalities and where we go from here, what does it look like for you? I mean, we know Andrew Brisboe and the Michigan Marijuana Regulatory Agency, they have killed it in how they've rolled out this program. We are top notch. And I think that's really an exciting place to be. But where do you think we go from here? And what's the opportunity for you guys? You mentioned 1/17th of the total addressable market, but how do you get those other guys on board? And is there any kind of timeline, that any investors watching here can look at and say, all right, here's some catalysts for me as I look at Gage and Red, White, and Blue?
No, look, from my perspective, I think, you also have, let's call it a more competitive licensing structure than people actually recognize. Okay, so that's the main thing about Michigan, Patrick, that, people should really know. You have a whole variety of other MSOs kind of continuing to tout the fact that, there's a lot of operators, there's a lot of competition in Michigan, and you have this unlimited state system. The thing is, when you actually look at it from a retail standpoint and what are the channels where you can actually sell your product directly to that consumer, it's very, very limited. Again, 1/17th on a rec basis. Medical's not that much better. It's like probably 300 to 400 of the municipalities have opted in out of the 1,700.
Yeah, it's about 4.
So again, so you're seeing a constrained market when it comes to licensing. And frankly, the longer at this point, Brad and Gage, Brad with Red, White, and Blue, and obviously myself with Gage, we've built up such a large, portfolio, vertically integrated portfolio, even across, the retail channels, and even a couple, maybe a small, other handful of our competitors. You're essentially controlling a large part of the Michigan market, and the slower it takes some of these municipalities to kind of enter the market, it's not so much of a bad thing for those that are already there and that have already established themselves quite well. We're going to be the ones to take advantage of this soon to be $2 billion market. It's these other companies that decide to try to come and compete organically. Good luck, in terms of just ramping up your ability to actually get retail locations. More importantly, as they continue to become more and more lucrative, as these cities seem to be slowing down in terms of how many licenses they're actually issuing.
Bang on for sure. But, I think what's going to happen is that, these municipalities, very similar to why New York never went first, they wanted New Jersey to go. And so municipalities are going to watch other municipalities and say, okay, you know what? we opted out, but I think there's a business here, and I think there's employment to be had. I think this isn't such a bad business after all. It's really just a normalizing of this business across, the United States period and how they operate. And so, the MRA and Brisbane and how they're doing it is a responsible release to market. And it's up to us to be good operators and good corporate citizens to show everybody that this is not the clandestine, basement thing. It's not a stepping stone thing. We're not selling crack in the back or anything like that. This is a real business that works, right? And that's what we're doing. It's a normalization. It's very similar to any other business, consumer-based business, and that's it. So
right.
I know that's what I'd say.
That's awesome, Brad. That leads me, both of what you said leads me into, let's talk about the city of Detroit for a second, right? That's where Benzinga is headquartered, and we're very familiar with that landscape. And it's been somewhat of a challenge in the state of Michigan, right? And they've rolled it out very, very slowly. Rec dispensaries, consumption lounges, they're finally on the cusp of opening. But there have been some massive delays as the city looks to prioritize locals, right? Long-term residents, Those people who have been here and can benefit, from this new business boon economically into the market here. So how has that challenge been for each of you as you've built out? I mean, I know, Fabian, you've got cookies on 8 Mile over there. And Brad, I know you guys have a crazy retail footprint as well. So tell me about the city of Detroit and how that's factored into the plan here.
Look, I still think, despite the delays that you see with the city of Detroit, you're still seeing immense amount of demand coming out of that city for product. There's only 75 licenses in the city of Detroit, only 25 on 8 Mile. Obviously, both Gage and Red, White, and Bloom have licenses in the city of Detroit. At its height, Patrick, you'll know this. At its height, I would say, let's call it, during the gray market times of Michigan, Detroit probably had 300 plus dispensaries, in that particular city, about 100 plus on 8 Mile. The fact that we're down to, 75 in the city and 25 on 8 Mile, just medical. If you take a look at the numbers that, some of these medical only dispensaries are performing at, they're still phenomenal. And again, I think that's just another selling point for Michigan as a whole. The largest city in Michigan, the strongest city in terms of consumption habits, a city that used to support 300 plus dispensaries is still not adult use. I think, again, it's just going to give Michigan another leg up once they finally figure out what the proper licensing structure is going to look like from an adult use standpoint. But again, I'm sure Brad will say the same thing. We're still seeing some phenomenal demand from medical only dispensaries. So we're not complaining just yet.
No, absolutely not. I fully agree. But as per what the regs want, they're looking for some locals to be able to partake in the business and not us. The big boys come in and like take over Walmartize, if you will, this. But I think what we're going to be able to do is actually help these guys. Whoever wants to get into the business, fund their business and show them how to operate effectively and compliantly, and all these other things that, the mom and pops are shutting down. They're having a hard time staying compliant and being, regulatorily, in the box, if you will. So I think, we have the opportunity now to help these people get into the market and share in the business. I mean, it's not all just going to be us. I think I'm more than happy to be a good corporate citizen and help, Detroit and the citizens there. And we're employing a whole pile of people and improving a lot of skill sets on a horizon of skill sets that go from PhDs all the way to frontline checkout folks and to security and all these skill sets that really make up what this business is. Our employment opportunity, our training opportunity, has every aspect of it for them to take from us and actually move on to do their own thing as well. So it's not just about us; it's about sharing, it's about building a business, and it's a whole new economy as well. So the High Times and the Gage banners are hallmarks and they're staples for sure. But there's going to be some smaller players that are going to be artisans and start up their own business. And I'm fully supportive of it, and I'm sure Fabian is as well.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so Fabian, I'll kick it to you. But when it comes to how you win in a market like Michigan, right? Flower is still dominant here. You've got vapes, and edibles seem to be a close third at the moment. They seem to be really coming on strong.
They're tracking well.
So what does it mean for you when it comes to these partnerships, right? And I know right now, investors who are watching, I'm sure they're looking at Catalyst. Who are you going to partner with? Who are you going to acquire? What's next for the company? The partnerships that you've got, right? You've got Cookies, you've got Slang. You just announced Blue River. You guys have really been burning and turning over there. What's it like for you guys in terms of addressing the Michigan market with these acquisitions and these brands?
Yeah, so I think the Michigan market it's a really refined market. You see a lot of maybe larger competitors come to Michigan and not perform as well, mainly because they don't have that same focus to branding, even as Brad, alluded to as he was talking about his brands. We take a similar kind of focus to the Michigan market. You have to take that type of focus when you're looking at a refined market. Remember, you have consumers that have been in a state-run medical program since 2008. You have some of the best operators, some of the best indoor grown product in the country in the state of Michigan. Going in there and creating, mid-tier type product without any actual beneficial branding associated with that product is not really going to get you anywhere. We focus heavily on the flower side of things. You saw, about 55% or so of the sales that we got, from last night's announcement were predominantly coming from flower, obviously. We focus on that market to start. We think that market is, probably the best market to focus on, at least initially in Michigan. And then now you're going to see us, quickly expand, especially with Slang and Blue River as our processing asset comes online. You're going to continue to see us actually partner with other best-in-class brands outside of the state of Michigan, partnering with them on an exclusive basis and bringing those same best-in-class brands, ones from California or ones from other states, to the state of Michigan. That's how you differentiate yourself in a refined market. That's how you continue to be at the forefront of giving consumers something new, giving consumers something that they want. And then more importantly, with those same brands constantly innovating, constantly coming to the market with something fresh, with something new, it keeps people, frankly, on their toes, and it keeps people coming to your dispensary. And that's a strategy we consistently employ at Gage, and you'll see us continue, again, further brand partnerships, further best-in-class brands, most importantly, having exclusivity on those brands to ensure that, we become a kind of one-stop shop, or at least a place that is highly desirable to go to from a branding standpoint.
Cool.
One thing I would add on that one, just real quickly, is that Michigan has such a confluence of contributing factors that are going to make it successful across so many different demographics. I mean, you look at northern Michigan and the affluence there, and the Ann Arbors, for instance, the college towns, and you look at Detroit proper. All of these stores are going to have to sort of have a different rationale of SKUs and SKU mixes to be able to actually pull these people in and keep them captive within your framework. So, Store of the Community, for instance, is going to be very different in Detroit than it will be in Ann Arbor, Walled Lake, Bay City. So you see the gummies, and you see all these other things really taking prevalence in other markets, whereas flower is going to be a staple in Detroit for a long time to come, I believe. So, you're going to see the product mixes change per store as well. So, and those, again, by brand, you're going to have to, get into that psychographic and demographic to appeal to those folks as well with those brands.
I love that. Thank you. When it comes to how we move forward here as an industry, we here in Michigan, in this market specifically, are looking to be a major additive, a major competitor. I think Ben Culver from GTI said recently expected New York to be a $5 billion market, right? $5 billion. Michigan could be that. Michigan could be there, right? We all see the opportunity here. You guys said it's 1/17 of the total addressable market that we have right now. I cannot wait to see what you guys do when you have access to more folks. So it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it. We've got Fabian Monaco, CEO of Gage, Brad Rogers, CEO of Red, White, and Bloom. I'm Patrick Lane from Benzinga. Guys, thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Had a lot of fun.
Appreciate it.
All
See
right.
you guys.
Thank you.
let's shift over to New York State. And New York went legal a few weeks ago. What does that mean for the state, and what does that mean for the industry and for Cresco?
It's big. I think it would. You can't overstate the importance of a state that is as influential as New York making this move. Right? There's a few states that, and again, being from Illinois and based in Illinois doesn't necessarily always act as the game changer or the thought leader. There are other states that definitely, from a cultural standpoint, from a financial standpoint, from a policy standpoint, tend to lead the way in progress. And, I think you can put California in that category for sure. And I think you absolutely can put New York in that category. You're talking about financial, media, cultural hub of the US and right up there in the world in those same categories. So the fact that New York figured out a way to do it, and again, through the legislative process, which is, it's a lot more difficult to pass something through the legislature than it is to just get a popular vote on it. And so for New York to figure out how to say yes, give enough yeses to the stakeholders that are sitting at that table to get that bill through Albany, really meaningful. And the impact that I think it has not only on sort of the current cannabis industry will be really impactful, but I think more states will now look at it and go, look, New York's done it now. They figured out a way to do it. We need to figure out a way to do it. And I think at a federal level, again, New York has a lot of influence over policy, and I think it'll be very helpful. Not only just as the legislators are debating this issue and kind of how to do it, and I think New York is going to set a very nice example on how to structure it. But again, the influence that the financial epicenter of really the world, being in New York, can have on some of these next stages of policy as it relates to U.S. cannabis is big. So whether that's banking reform or even just broader, again, sort of moves towards legalization, I think New York has a lot of influence in those areas. So it's going to have a meaningful impact for sure.
I'm Vladimir. You guys already know me, co-founder of Happy Monkey. And the reason that it's such a big deal is that, we've been in prohibition here for 80 years. And, even though other parts of the country have had, some sort of liberation, over here, it hasn't been like that, and you guys are numbers guys, so I can give you some numbers that are not too far in the past. The 2020 numbers state that 94% of all arrests for cannabis in New York City were Black and brown people. So I just mentioned that, gentlemen, so you can understand it's not 1995, 2005, 2015, 2020. So it's right now that, we have one of the best, fresh out looking bills in the country that we had to fight for, by the way, because I remember, communicating with you guys. There was two bills on the ballot. Governor was trying to push the CRTA, which was going to have a silent auction bid, basically like, dog whistle for billionaires. Only in a place like the financial capital of the world, there was going to be no home grow, no delivery, no social consumption, and very little social equity. I think they were thinking about doing a fund of like $150 million for the communities most impacted, which is not going to do much in a place like New York. So then we, never really have taken a big stance in advocacy, but we felt like it was our duty because this is our city and our town. And, we're originally from the legacy market and we know what was going to happen. So we put a petition together with some organizations like the People's Dispensary. A good friend of ours is Hawk Newsom. He's the founder of Black Lives Matter for New York State. And he backed us and, told us, hey, you guys not only have my support, put my logo on the petition. And we got like 1,000 signatures. We got people from all over the country to repost it. And the final verdict was the MRTA, which has home grow. has social consumption licenses, has delivery licenses, and instead of 150 million for social equity, 20% of the gross revenue, which means anywhere from 750 million to $1 billion for those communities impacted the most by the war on drugs, automatic expungement. 50% of the first licenses will go to social equity applicants. So from going from what I just showed you to that is just, it's so unbelievable that I know how Ramon maybe can piggyback off of me, that not just everybody born and raised in New York has a tough time understanding that you can carry 3 ounces on you, you can have 5 pounds in your house legally, that it really hasn't sunk in, because after all your life being persecuted and oppressed for this plant, and now this happened, it's hard for it to materialize in your head. What do you think, Ramon?
Right. So, all right. So I'll piggyback a little bit off what you said, right? So what does that mean for the regular community, to the regular person who just wants to smoke weed, right? What does that mean for them? Like you just mentioned, right? They're allowed to carry 3 ounces of weed on them, which is a very, very big deal for someone who consumes and wants to just be at home smoking weed, right? Because just being able to go purchase weed right now, even in 2020, is a big deal for them. It's a real big danger, right? So that takes that out the way, right? That's one. Two, for those who've ever been arrested, not only New York State people who've been arrested from New Jersey, people who've been arrested from Connecticut, or anybody who's not from New York State and you've been arrested for a very minor offense of marijuana, that shit goes away. That's very important. The storage part, like you said, you're able to store 5 pounds at home. That's awesome for the regular consumer. Like, they can't get in trouble for 5 pounds of weed. That makes a big deal. You're able to grow your own weed at home. That's a hell of a big deal for people in New York. This is, like, again, we're all still traumatized. It's all still going to take a little while for us to actually go ahead. Oh, another big thing is that we're able to smoke where you're permitted to smoke cigarettes at. That's a big deal.
Why Pennsylvania? Why are you there, and how is it different versus some of the other areas that you're operating in?
So Pennsylvania is known as the Keystone State, and it is the Keystone State for Jushi. It was our first major acquisition. We acquired a company with 12 retailers. And so why is Pennsylvania a great state in the cannabis industry? It's a limited license market, like we all talk about those, many states are, but it is a medical market. And I believe of the large markets, now I'm talking about states that have 10, 12 million people or more, very large markets. This is, I think, been the fastest growing state in in a medical market. And there's been a tremendous uptake in the medical community, meaning the doctors and nurses and the practitioners getting behind the program. The way they originally constructed the program, they brought the medical community in early on, they being the government, the regulators who structured the program. So the medical community embraced it. A lot of the unions embraced it. It's a union state. And there's just been a very quick uptake. People talk about Florida a lot being, one of the really big medical states. Pennsylvania has about 13 million people. Florida has about 21 million people. Pennsylvania has been at this a few years less than Florida. And I think Pennsylvania has about 400,000 patients and Florida has about 500,000 patients. Now, all those numbers are off, but that's directionally what's happened. A newer program with a smaller state that's achieved that status. And Pennsylvania is regular, the regulations limit the dispensaries to about a couple hundred. I'm speaking in round terms, not trying to get too technical, and about 24 to 30 grower processors. And so you have a good, and allows a wholesale business. In Florida, there's no wholesale business. Patients like choice. They don't want to just walk in. I'll speak about a great company called Trulieve. They have a lot of dispensaries in Florida. Everybody knows Trulieve, but you go into a dispensary, in Trulieve, it's mostly all Trulieve products and brands that they produce for, some brand companies. It's basically all comes out of their factory. If you walk into a store in Pennsylvania, you'll see you'll see tons of different brands by different growers, different ways of doing things, different genetics, and the patients like that. So that's really cool for the patients. And then lastly, in terms of adult use, the market's moving fast in Pennsylvania. The governor's behind it. It feels like the legislature and senator behind it. New Jersey shares a very large border with New Jersey. You look on the map, for you Canadians, it's right next to it. It shares a huge border. And when New Jersey, starts selling recreational, that puts a lot of pressure on the Pennsylvania government to not lose tax revenues and have people cross over the border and buy in New Jersey. So we think it'll be a kind of a regional thing that happens in the area. So Pennsylvania is on a really fast track to go from a small medical program to a large medical program to adult use. And lastly, I'll just say this: if you look, we're as big as you can get in Pennsylvania. We have 18 dispensaries, a very large grower processor, a very enviable position. There's only one other company as big as we are at the current time, but it is the state that has the most. Look at all the biggest companies with the best balance sheets and most firepower. Most of their acquisitions since the market opened back up to cannabis last fall have been in Pennsylvania. So in other words, just go through the good companies, look where they've done their acquisitions. Where has it been? Pennsylvania.
Why Florida? Like, other than I know it's your home and I know it's your passion, but for the industry itself, why Florida?
Yeah, well, I mean, really that goes back to our origins. So when Florida was considering a medical cannabis program, like many states, they were considering CBD first. And then we knew that it would, or we hoped it would quickly transition into a more full-blown medical program. And so when I was asked to join the Trulieve team, we really took a pretty hard look at what was happening in the industry and what the opportunity was in the sector. And so we did a lot of traveling, talked to a lot of folks, and that was in 2014. What became apparent to us in the concept of just MSO was, just starting. And so we had companies that were kind of, running around the country and grabbing a lot of licenses. And it became apparent to us a couple things. Number one, this really was a true industry with a lot of demand behind it. And the products that were on the marketplace really had the ability to change people's lives. So that was sort of first and foremost. The second thing was that there really wasn't any real brands that had been created at that time. Certainly some products, but in terms of a true kind of national or broad-based brand. So there was white space that was available. And when we looked at kind of the landscape across the country vis-a-vis Florida, a few things really stood out to us. Number one, we had the ability to scale in Florida in a way that was very unique versus other markets. So in many other markets, you had to pick which part of the supply chain you were going to enter. And also in many cases, there are limitations on those pieces of supply chain. So whether it's canopy limitation, number of retail locations you can have, et cetera. In Florida, there was none of that. So it was unlimited cultivation opportunity, unlimited production opportunity, and unlimited retail opportunity. And so that in and of itself was very unique. Second, in Florida, we have the power of a population. And so, we're the third most populous state, over 21 million residents. And most people don't know this, but franchise concepts often come to Florida to test brand because of the interesting change in demographics that you have from North Florida to South Florida and everything in between. And so we thought, this is a perfect opportunity for us to really test the theory that we could develop a true customer-centric cannabis brand that resonated with all kinds of different folks across the population center. And so that's what we set out to do. And as you know, we're the market leader in Florida with over 50% of the current market share. And the market has been growing by leaps and bounds. Last year, we ended the year with approximately 2,000 patients entering the program per week. Now we're at about 6,000 patients per week, and we're just over 500,000 patients total in the state of Florida. So still a ton of growth ahead of us. process. We could easily double the medical program in Florida. And then, of course, when you start to talk about recreational and tourism, there's about 130 million tourists that visit Florida every single year. So massive opportunity ahead on the growth curve in the state of Florida. And we really like the position of having such scale in the Southeast as additional southern states and southeastern states look to begin medical cannabis. I mean, right now we're in a little bit of a cannabis island, I say, in Florida vis-a-vis our neighboring states.
You touched on recreational. What is the status of that?
Yeah, so it's a bit, kind of in an interesting spot right now. So in Florida, so to back up, the medical initiative in Florida passed overwhelmingly. It actually passed with over 70% of the vote. It was the highest passage rate of any ballot initiative ever in Florida history. Medical cannabis is now polling at about a 90% approval rate, which is insane. And recreational is polling very strong as well. So in the low 70s currently, without any kind of campaign or anything around it. So we think that really it is a function of just getting something on the ballot. We do think that folks are ready for it. So then it's the getting it on the ballot part. In Florida, it's a bit of a unique process. You have to go through a Supreme Court review on language prior to being able to get on the ballot. And so the Supreme Court couple weeks ago actually did not approve one initiative that had been pending. There's another initiative that's still pending. So we're waiting to see what happens on that. And then they did, however, provide significant guidance in terms of what would need to be done to get language better postured for passage. So I would say that it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when in Florida. And again, you just have to get through that process with the court. So not sure at this point if it's 2022, 2024, again, remains to be seen. And again, we also have a very, very extensive runway ahead of us with growth with the medical program as well.
Wow, that was great. If you've been with us on this journey, we have gone through the federal cannabis and the policies in there, U.S. legalization, and we have just wrapped up part 2 with the United States of Cannabis, taking us from the left coast to the east coast, up and down, ending in Florida, starting in Cali. It's been great. Now, show me the money. And I want to, with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague and host, Ayinehsazian. Don't forget, this will be available on replay on CSE_TV on YouTube. And you can also check out www.thecse.com. But with that, Ayinehsazian, show us the money.
Thank you, Barrington. So thank you, first of all, to all of our viewers who have stuck around all afternoon. We have one more clip to show you. And as Barrington mentioned, it's about investing in cannabis. So the most important part is yet to come. We did manage to find about 10 minutes, kind of the best meat in that sandwich. But the full interview, of course, can be found on CSE TV. So make sure you go check it out if you like to hear what they have to say. I had the opportunity to interview Ross O'Brien, CEO of Bonaventure Equity, and Nick Gestovich, Vice President of V. Gestovich Investments. And we talk about investing in cannabis. Cannabis is still federally illegal in the United States of America. State by state, they do have the option to become medicinal or recreationally legal within that jurisdiction and manage it from there. Because it's federally illegal, there's a few intricacies that are different. One is that the banking system is under federal government law. And so there's something called the SAFE Act, which essentially, and you guys can maybe clarify this a little bit, but essentially cannabis companies can't have a bank account. They can't use the banking system to run their operations, to pay taxes. From what I've heard, they have to show up with a truck full of cash. And so there's a lot of glitches in what's become such a massive industry based on the fact that it's federally currently illegal. One of the other glitches is that if you touch the plant, you cannot be listed on a US stock exchange. And that's where the CSE has come in we've opened our doors that if you are operational in a jurisdiction that is legal, that we would allow you to list with us. And that's why we're seeing so many of these companies come to the CSE, and we welcome them with open arms. So based on some of these intricacies, because it's a little bit different than other emerging markets where you don't have those kind of hiccups, what it's done, and Ross, I am going to start with you again on this one because you are a bit more early stage, and then I'm going to get to you, Nick, because you invest in a lot of public companies and pre-public. Because of this structure, companies have had to be a lot more creative with the way that they can raise capital. They can't go to a bank and take out a loan. They can't list on an exchange and raise capital, in the public way in the US. So they've had to be a bit more creative. So there's a bunch of different opportunities. Ross, I'd like you to talk about, because I know that you're involved in a few of them and look at a few of them, but there's kind of the VC investors, angel investors, private equity, going into public equity, and then we get into kind of the funds, the institutional, equity as well. So Ross, I'll let you start off because you're a bit earlier stage in your investments, aren't you?
We are, and I think the one sort of lens that we start with, in particular with the founders that we're working with, because it's all about finding the companies and the teams to back, is just we want to work with founders that have a comprehension as to the different types of capital that are accessible to companies at different points in their life cycle. And it all comes down to the cost of capital, right? So I said earlier about this creativity around lending. So there are private lenders that are out there that will lend to cannabis companies, but they're extremely expensive and they're looking for equity returns. And some of them we think are actually, not legal in terms of the interest rates that they're charging. And if they came under any usury law scrutiny, might be a challenge. Again, sort of a temporary rush in to put capital into the space. So for the founders and the entrepreneurs out there, always be cognizant of what the exchange is, what the cost of capital is. We saw in an earlier stage, I think private equity is a misnomer in this space. Show me a company with 5 years of historical audited financials that has year-over-year growth rates that traditional private equity would be interested in. There's few, but they're few and far between. There's no sort of middle market private equity, space yet. And to Nick's point, I think we're seeing the barbell, sort of transactions happening where there's a lot of earlier stage angel investors, family offices, very savvy family offices filling, the gap that the traditional venture would normally fill. And then there's this sort of no man's land until you get to the mega deals that are happening with the private capital space, like Nick was talking about, that are really sizable. And for us, I think, we were always concerned about the valuation dynamic, but I think the positive momentum that we're seeing from both the Safe Banking Act in the U.S. and then through all the things that you've done at the CSE and the pathways that you've created for companies that can find liquidity in markets and get to a more efficient marketplace at the right size. I think if we look at the momentum there, there's a lot of positivity to that. And I think those things will continue to mature and stabilize the capital markets for more and more opportunities, because we're only going to see more entrepreneurship, more startups, and more company development in the space as new states come online in the US.
Absolutely. And Nick, you in our pre-chat, you kind of discussed, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but typically you've taken the stance of investing in companies that are kind of pre-IPO. Is that kind of part of your investment thesis when you're looking at companies to invest in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously GTI was a specific case where we were fortunate to get involved early on, but most of kind of the larger MSO investments, and this has been a kind of purposeful play on our part, is playing that private to public arbitrage opportunity with, kind of like the Krescolev, Verano, Ascend Wellness, all targeting those kind of couple raises in the year or two before the companies went public, and there's just tremendous opportunity kind of capitalizing on the discount that private operators often raise capital at. But yeah, but we have, we do look at other investments that are early kind of stage, not as quite as clear as a path to getting public. So we've looked at the full gambit. I think we've just gravitated heavily towards kind of the larger MSOs as kind of a function of this kind of lack of easy capital that plagues the whole industry. In the context of, safe banking or federal legislation, it's an interesting just thought process to consider. I think post-election, a lot of investors, and you saw this in kind of like the February peak in the market, everyone was expecting quick legislation, quick changes, everyone to uplist immediately to US exchanges. And as an investor in kind of these MSOs, that wasn't necessarily an ideal situation in my mind, just because the kind of opportunity with a limited set of capital for operators, that meant the companies that can access, larger equity raises or access, I think we just saw with GTI raising debt at a 7% interest rate. That is a fundamental differentiator between them and kind of early companies that are still raising at, 15% interest rates. So I think obviously federal illegality creates a whole mess of challenges, 280E, banking, you name them. But also creates kind of opportunity to see who are the companies that can operate in this somewhat difficult environment. And as investors, it also gives us the chance to invest in a space where institutional money has not entered yet. And I think kind of that slow and methodical, up into the right growth path that we're already seeing despite all of these challenges with federal illegality, is almost a better situation for some of these operators as opposed to full-fledged legalization right now. And every, big money, big tech, big pharma, what have you, jumps in immediately, and there's competition everywhere. So definitely it's a plus minus game, and something we're watching closely. It's just the evolution of the kind of state versus federal landscape.
Okay, so I want to touch on the word MSO is sprinkled throughout almost all conversations, especially U.S. cannabis. So MSO is a multi-state operator, and it's funny, Ross. I met Ross. I think it's been about 2 years now. Time is weird now that we're in lockdown, but I think it was about 2 years ago. I met Ross at one of his events, and that was really the first time you really started hearing about MSOs. And so, tell me if I'm wrong, Nick. The play of the MSO is essentially that if a company can get as far reaching across the United States as they can in different jurisdictions, that eventually when it's federally legal, they'll be positioned in a way to become, kind of a behemoth. Is that kind of the idea behind most of these?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll hear different opinions from different groups, and even within MSOs, there's a big kind of wide range. You have the Curaleafs of the world who are in 20 plus states, and then you have TerrAscend, who's concentrated in like 2 or 3. Both are billion-dollar companies, and both are MSOs. But the difference between those is quite vast. Right. I think you'll have some people who say that, look, if you look at the kind of language and desire of kind of U.S. legislatures who are ultimately going to create whatever federal legislation is there, they're going to be highly incentivized to protect these state programs that generate local, taxes and jobs and all that. Like I know here in Illinois, there's kind of failed horribly at it, but there's supposed to be all these social equity licenses given out, including like craft grows in a future interstate market. Little 5,000 square foot grows here in Illinois have no chance of competing against giant grows out on the West Coast. So I think if you talk to certain operators, they'll say like, hey, this state by state market is somewhat here to stay, even if interstate walls fall to some extent down the line. Whereas I think other companies are clearly positioning themselves in light of a future interstate market. And I think there's, opportunity for both. I think the MSOs of today, perhaps some of their cultivation might get in an interstate trade open market get shut down just because of inefficiencies, and then they'll buy a giant grow out west and eventually feed their stores that way. So I think it's always a good discussion to have in terms of evaluating your investments and seeing how they fit into what a future federally legal market would look like.
Wow. That was great, Anna. You have a very natural cadence and rhythm when it comes to, simplifying things for people like me and for some members of the audience who, may not necessarily feel comfortable with banking and financing and investing. So thank you, and thank you for for that along with your guests.
I do want to say that was actually a 50-minute interview. We only had the time for 10 minutes today. But if you did find that interesting, definitely go check out the full interview. Those guys manage quite a bit of money and invest a lot in the cannabis space. And also, I want to mention that Ross O'Brien actually wrote a book on cannabis. It's called Cannabis Capital: How to Get Your Business Funded in the Cannabis Economy. The CSE would like to give out this as a gift for anyone that's interested. Send us an email to media@thecse.com. That's media@thecse.com. We would love to get your feedback. We don't get to see you guys in person anymore, so it would be so great to get your feedback about today's event. And we have much more to come this month that we'll be talking about. But if you're interested in Ross's book, he will send you out, as a gift from the CSE, he'll send you out a signed copy if you send us some feedback. Oh, and make sure you send your mailing address as well. So Barrington, that went fast.
That went fast, and I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you on behalf of Anna and myself and the Canadian Securities Exchange to the companies and the people who have helped start the Cannabis Investor Series off, and a shout out to Benzinga Cannabis, and in particular Patrick Lane. Please check out their website, www.benzinga.com, for more information about their upcoming events. I believe they have one on June the 3rd, and there might be somebody here who is speaking at that event. So make sure you take a look. Thank you to our attendees, both live and on the replay. We encourage you to go to the company's websites and learn more, not only about the businesses and fundamentals, but some of the issues facing the sector. Anna, what is happening in week 2?
It's the culture of cannabis and capital markets. It's going to be a really, really fun week. So I definitely encourage you guys to join us. Our media partner next week is High Times. I'm sure, a little publication maybe you've heard of. So we're really excited about some of the interviews that are coming next week. It'll be at the same time on the same day, Tuesday at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Make sure that you join us. And again, if you hit the subscribe button on CSE TV, you'll get notified when those full interviews get posted.
Oh, that's awesome. And again, Anna, it's always a pleasure whenever I get the chance to host a program with you. And James, thanks for operating everything. We really, really appreciate it. Yes. Round of applause. And to reiterate what Anna said, please send us your feedback. Let us know what you like, what would you like to hear, just any comments. So with that, take care. Thank you for joining us on the Cannabis Investor Series.
Thank you for joining us. Thanks, Bear.
This is the Cannabis Investor Series.